Beth, 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 it's
What?
showtime. It's showtime
I'm
right
almost
now.
ready. Hold the curtain for a couple of minutes, would you? Um, uh, God, do I miss my hairdresser? I don't know if this is what he used. Oh, no,
Beth, Beth, it doesn't work that way. We're live streaming right now. Right now.
no.
We're live
Really?
streaming. Yes.
Oh God,
Yes.
I've never done this before.
Well, I can see that,
I've never.
and everyone else can see that too.
Oh well. Okay, Mark. Let's put on a show.
That music that you were playing, we'll start there. Um, right at the beginning, that's from a score from a documentary that you did, right?
Yes, called Masters of Production. The hidden art of Hollywood. It's about the worlds that you see on the screen and the creators that make it, the production designers. Beautiful film.
Excellent. Well, so Beth, or are you actually, were you named Elizabeth?
Oh no, I'm a real Beth. I was named for the Beth in Little Women. My mother loved that book. She read it to us as kids. And
Oh,
later I went on to actually orchestrate the fourth remake of the movie with Elmer Bernstein. And you know what?
wow.
I would love to play the main theme to dedicate to our mothers, human and non-human. Can I do that? Okay.
Yeah, please. That was beautiful. That was absolutely beautiful. That
Thank
was
you.
beautiful.
That last picture was me and my jig, so it kind of gets me every time.
That was absolutely gorgeous. Well, so tell me a little bit about when you were in Los Angeles. You, how did you hook up with Elmer Bernstein? I mean, I've always wanted to know that.
Well, I went to Los Angeles first to study accompanying at USC. It was one of the only places in the country that had an accompanying major, and that was always my passion. And while I was there, I also studied at the Dick Grove music workshops where we had access to all the great arrangers and composers, and it was working professionals, and they were there part-time. I got to study with Nelson Riddle and Henry Mancini and Johnny Mandel and all of them, and it seems like quite a few of them, the majority of them, were trombone players. And I asked one of them, how come it seems like there's so many great writers that are trombonists? And he said, well, we're placed in the middle of the orchestra. Trumpets are behind us, strings are over here, etc. And so they were right in the middle. So they hear everything and they just had a natural feel for it. And so then Elmer Bernstein called Dick Grove because they were sort of the heart of the music then. And he said, I need your strongest accompanist and best sight reader. And it was for not for a film, it was for a little vaudeville musical that he was doing. And so they decided that was me. And so I went to meet him. I shook his hand. Well, we could do that at that time. And showed him some of the things that I had done, some of the things I had written. And then he said to me, well, have you ever thought about doing film music orchestration? I was, duh, what's that? I mean, I didn't know. And so he said, look, I'm going to Europe for the Royal Philharmonic. We're doing some recording. While I'm gone, take a couple of piano pieces and orchestrate them for me. Even if you think you don't know what you're doing, when I come back, I'll look at them and let's talk. So I did, and the rest was my history. But it was quite natural to me because, to me, film music is just another form of accompanying, just with a much bigger piano.
So you worked with Elmer Bernstein on many of his scores then, didn't you?
Right.
And I think you also you worked with a lot of other composers as well as artists, and then you did your own as well, right?
I did, and I was scared to death to do that at first because in those days we didn't have the computers and all the stuff that we've got now, and I had to work things out mathematically, and I always flunked math. I flunked geometry, I flunked algebra. So anyway, Elmer mentored me along, and I did it, and it was great.
Well, so between, your film music assignments, and you were arranging for a lot of, I do know that you arranged and worked with such artists as David Foster, Placido Domingo, Burt Bacharach, Barbara Streisand, and others. So what made you decide to leave that and come back to New York?
Well, at that time, things were changing a lot. Orchestras were shrinking, electronics taking over. I put together my own little studio at home, but it just wasn't the same. I missed that bigger piano. And I guess I was just ready for a change, and Broadway had always called to me. I grew up playing show tunes for my very musical family to sing. And Redken International brought me to New York to do a show at Madison Square Garden. They were introducing
Oh,
new hair colors. And so I said okay to that. And then they said, but you have to conduct the orchestra, and we're going to do a makeover on you. You're going to be a flaming redhead. Okay. Uh, so they contracted an amazing orchestra for me, and it was a dream come true, but I was terrified. I'd heard all the
oh,
stories about cold, callous New Yorkers, You know, one mistake and they'll eat you alive. Um, so got there, we did a rehearsal from 2 to 6 in the afternoon. All the models, the stylist, everybody was there, and of course there were a lot of script changes, which meant there were a lot of musical changes needed. So there was a dinner break at 6 o'clock. Showtime was 8, and I had to make all those changes. So I took the score into my dressing room. Yeah, spread the music all over the floor. How am I going to do this? And so I'm writing because we didn't have the computers then. And suddenly I looked up, and there in the door was the guitarist in the orchestra. And he said, what are you doing? And so I told him. He nodded, and then he left. And 5 minutes later, he came back into the room, followed by half the orchestra, pencils in hand. And they said, give us our parts. And so I had to try real hard not to cry like a girl. But I would finish a page, a score page, they'd grab it, they'd somehow get their parts done. And that was the cold, callous New York musicians. And it was a dream. Between my flaming red hair and these musicians, I had a blast waving a stick at all these handsome men on stage wanting to do my bidding. Quite a fantasy.
So you made your way back to New York, and then you started working with, I mean, some of Broadway's biggest stars.
Yeah, after a wonderful 6-year stop in Princeton on the way, but that's another story. But I commuted into the city whenever I could, and it's kind of fun to trace back one's journey. Um, I joined the Dramatists Guild. They introduced me to a networking group where I met Linda Burns. Linda Burns introduced me to Charles Strauss. Charles Strauss asked me to play for a tribute that was being given to him, produced by Nancy Rhodes of Encompass New Opera Theater. And that became something that I did every year. And I'm now their music director, and I put the shows together. And so then I met Sheldon Harnick at one of the Symphony Space events, back-to-back Broadway, which was from noon to midnight. And he's become one of my most treasured friends and mentors. And a little bit later, he asked me if I would be music director for him for a wonderful musical called Dragons at the York Theater. And I kept putting him off because I didn't think I was ready to do that. And but incredibly, he kept asking, and what am I going to do? And so I talked to a beautiful friend, Kristen Blodgett, who's one of our foremost music directors. She's been with Phantom of the Opera for over 30 years and any other show that can get her. And she said, you got to do it. So I did it, and I loved it.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's incredible. Well, I mean, you have a lifetime of great stories. Um, I'm sure that we'll be able to get to hear more. I I think that you've got somebody waiting in the wings though right now. Do you maybe want to tell
Oh,
us a little bit about it?
okay. Yeah. Costume change first. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Whoops.
Is that a hint?
Yeah. And you got to check out my t-shirt. Can you read it?
Broadway Bark 15. Nice.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm wearing this in honor of our first guest, Bill Berloni. And every July, you can wander down to Midtown Manhattan and find him in the
Hmm.
alley, Schubert Alley, that is, where
Okay.
he helps to get dogs that just need a second chance, help get them adopted. And
Oh, wow.
you know, it's been said that when Bill Berloni barks, Broadway listens. Well, what I mean is when Bill's clients when Bill's clients bark or meow
Uh-huh.
or chirp or whinny, if you've seen an animal on a major stage in the last few decades, chances are pretty good that Bill had something to do with it. So, Bill, where are you? Bill? Aha.
Hello.
Hey. So, Bill, how did this all start?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm born and raised here in Connecticut, Central Connecticut, and when I was in high school, I wanted to be an actor. So instead of spending my summers having fun with my friends, I decided I wanted to be around professionals and try to learn as much as I could. So I applied for an apprenticeship at the Goodspeed Opera House here in East Haddam, Connecticut. And for those of you who don't know the Goodspeed, it's one of the country's best regional theaters dedicated to the American musical. And I got accepted as a technical apprentice right after I graduated high school. And I was living my dream, uh, building scenery, but I was around professionals, around professional actors, professional composers. And my second summer there, the summer of 1976, is when they did a new musical about a comic strip about a little redheaded girl called Little Orphan Annie. And after they had
Oh,
announced the season, we realized there was a part in the show for a dog. And they called New York, and all the New York animal trainers were very expensive. And all the paid staff members, the crew guys, threatened to quit if they had to train the dog. So they needed a sucker, somebody they could trick into training the dog for no money. And I remember being called into the executive producer's office. Mr. Michael Price, he was the executive producer for over 50 years, sat me down in a chair and said, "Bill, how would you like a part in one of our shows and your equity card?" Now, I'm 19 years old. I had no training, and I thought he had recognized my acting ability by the way I had been moving scenery. So I said, "Sure, Mr. Price, that would be great." And he said, "All you have to do, kid, is find and train a dog for the show, Annie, for no money." And I agreed. I was like, "Absolutely." I mean, when we're in those positions to see our dreams come true, we say yes before we think of all the details.
yep.
Well, he gave me $35 that summer, the summer of 1976, to find the dog and feed it all summer. And someone said they had cheap animals at the animal shelter. Uh, but I'm an only child. I grew up on a farm. I had a collie until I was 11 years old. And when he passed, I got a beagle. So animals were my constant companions growing up. So I took a Polaroid camera and the truck, and I went casting for the role of Sandy, the dog in the show. And I started going to animal shelters in Central Connecticut, and I was really taken back. I mean, I'd never been to an animal shelter at the age of 19, and the
Oh,
conditions under which I saw these animals being held broke my heart. And I ended up at the Connecticut Humane Society, which is Connecticut's largest animal welfare group. And back then, they were a kill shelter, and
mm.
there were hundreds of dogs, but there was one little dog who was just sitting there, sort of in the back of his cage. I knelt down. He came over to me, and when I inquired about him, they said he was going to be put to sleep the next day, which again was another revelation. I had no idea that dogs had
Mm.
expiration dates and that
Oh, yeah.
they could be expired. So I said, "Can I put a deposit down on him? I had to get him approved." They said, "No, you got to adopt him." And I reached in my pocket and I only had $3, and he was 7. And when they
Oh,
saw I had 3, they kicked me out. So I went back to the opera house, tried to find the producer, Michael Price, or the director, Martin Charnin, to okay this dog, and they weren't around. And I worried about it all night. And my roommate said, "Here's $4. Go back tomorrow morning before they open and adopt the dog," which is what I did. And so I trained Sandy for the Good Speed
yay.
production. And a year later, we opened on Broadway, and Annie became an international smash, and I became a world famous animal trainer.
God. Well, so what did you do that was different? I mean, why did it work?
You know, going back to my childhood, I had a dog, as I said, a cat, and a rabbit. Um, and I remember my childhood being very, it was a lot of fun. I mean, I played with my animals and they hung out with me in the front yard. They weren't tied up, there were no fences. So I must have realized how to make them enjoy being with me, how to play their games. Because when you force an animal to do anything, they go in the opposite direction. So
Mm,
when I got the opportunity to train Sandy, I thought, well, if I can make him think the stage is his home and the people are his
mhm.
family and friends, he'll do the same thing every night. So it was the basis of a positive reinforcement method of training where we set up situations where the animals wanted to work as opposed to being forced to work. And the lucky part of it was my first Sandy's first acting partner was a child. And you put a kid and a dog together and they start playing and that bond happens immediately. So, when I would
Right.
have Sandy in the wings, he would want to go see his little girl. There was no
Aw.
pushing around it. So that's how it
Well,
all happened, and it's worked ever since.
wow. So rescuing and training Sandy was the end of your acting career and the beginning of your career as an animal trainer. But then many years later, many Annie revivals later, uh, little orphan Annie finally finds her family in the movie Annie Warbucks.
Mhm.
The not movie, the new musical rather. And you said that what happened in that show was in a sense the real start of your career. How could that be?
Well, that's an interesting story. I was terrified when the show opened on Broadway because I didn't know how to train dogs. And soon after, I was asked to train dogs for the Richard Burton revival of Camelot and another show. And every time I was afraid that I was either going to fail or someone's going to find out that I really don't know what I'm doing. Um, but Martin Charnin and Charles Strauss and Tommy Ian wrote a sequel to Annie called Annie 2. And we found a rescue dog. His name was Bo. We did the show out of town, and as you all know, Annie 2 was a huge disaster. And even the reviews said, even the dog doesn't look like Sandy. So
Oh,
when they rewrote the script for Annie Warbucks, they said, you got to find a dog that looks exactly like your Sandy, the original one. So I found a little dog named Chelsea, and she had been somewhat abused. She wasn't really right for the show, but we had a production we had to get up right away. And during preparation for that, the original Sandy passed away. And we
oh,
had set up a big press event at the World Trade Towers where the little girl was going to sing the hit song from that show with this little scared dog. And I thought this is not going to work. Plus, I was grieving. And uh, Martin Charnin, the director, called me up and he said, you've got to come tomorrow. You've got to be with us. And I was like, Martin, I don't think I could. And he said, no, you need to be with us. We're your family. We're your theatrical family. And, we all loved Sandy. So they sent a car for me. And when I came down and we did the show, and I was, again, just worried that Chelsea, this dog, was going to be terrified. And she walked up on stage and she sat there like a champ. I mean, in the middle of, the World Trade Towers area. And I, I was in disbelief. And then I saw a white dove fly over her. And I thought, that's Sandy telling me, I think I know what I'm doing. You got it, kid. And so that
oh,
really gave me sort of confidence to move forward with a different belief system.
God, how beautiful. Jeez. um, well, the old show business adage that I'm sure we've all heard, never work with children or animals, was said famously by W.C. Fields. And many
Mhm,
stars won't even appear with animals or children on stage because they get all the awes and they steal the
mhm.
show. Why do you think that is?
Oh, well, I always say if you're going to be in a show with the animal, be the one who stands next to the animal because they steal all that focus. And over the years, I've watched and tried to figure out why. And what I've come to believe is that um, when we know that everybody's acting on stage, that the actors there are saying lines and they're pretending to emote, but animals don't act. They are the ultimate method actors. And I can say that because when I did come to New York, I did study acting with Stella Adler, famous Stella Adler, who was part of the group theater, and she taught the method acting technique. And so I studied that for a while. And then all of a sudden, I was working with creatures who were always in the moment. And um, so there's a danger to that when an actor on stage is really being real. Um, so like in Annie, when Sandy is happy to see Annie, that's natural. But sometimes there are plays or musicals where they want the animal to act frightened or menacing. Well, you can't really frighten a dog, or you can't teach a dog to be aggressive. Great example of that is a play a couple years ago, a revival called The Crucible, in which it was directed by Ivo Van Hove, and he decided he wanted a wolf to come across the stage, come
A
down to
wolf?
the edge of the stage, a wolf, scan the audience as if he's going to attack them, and then disappear into the mist. Um, and so we found a breed of dog called Temescans, and we borrowed one for the show. And people who came to see it were terrified because this big wolf-like creature comes down to the edge of the stage and watches the audience. Well, in reality, it was just so simple. I had laid a trail of cookies on the deck, which brought him to the edge of the stage. And then we had a stage manager in the back of the house with his favorite toy. And she held it up and she walked behind the audience. And so he would follow that movement. And if he did it, he'd run off stage and we'd play with him in the lobby. But what the audience saw was this dog staring them down. So, that's the reality. That's real method acting right there.
Wow. uh, Bill, are there really animal understudies and and for some shows more than one dog for the same character, a calm one and a more energetic one? Is that true?
Um, well, in any professional production, every actor has a standby. Every musical conductor has a standby. I mean, any member of the cast, crew, or orchestra that gets sick, there's someone to step in. So why wouldn't an animal
True.
have the right to get ill? So we always have a second dog who will play the understudy, and what we do is we train the understudy dog with the understudy actors. On stage,
Okay.
they understand what's going on with the scenery. But the show has to go on, and you don't want to see me in a dog suit. That's for sure.
Hmm. Yeah. And I understand that you had a couple of very different dogs playing the same character in was it Legally Blonde?
Well, in Legally Blonde, no, the same dog. His name was Chico, who he played the show every night. But we did have an understudy who was the calm one that we did all the press with. Chico was very forward and very opinionated, but out in public, he'd be really bossy. So we had a little guy named Teddy who we'd send out on all the publicity gigs to do the shots and all that sort of stuff.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Oh gosh, I wish we had 10 or 20 more hours to hear all these stories. It's so heartwarming, funny. I mean, training lambs for Gypsy, uh, spiders, rats. God. But I was so enthralled with this beautiful book that you wrote, Broadway Tales. And
Mhm.
since then, so many new furry stars have stolen their respective shows that you've had to write another book about it, haven't you? Which is due out next month, I understand. And this one will include
Yeah.
the story of Trixie, who did her best to
Mhm.
steal the show from Karen Ziemba in Bullets Over Broadway, right?
Yep. Yes. Broadway Tales is actually a rescue book in that each chapter is chronologically one of my Broadway shows and the rescue story behind it. So over the years,
Ah,
as you know, I would, in addition, I would do another 5 Broadway shows, and they'd say, "Can you update the book?" So the cover that we just showed today is the last 8 years of Broadway shows. So, and that does include Karen Ziemba and a little dog named Trixie.
oh, wow. Well, before Karen joins us, would
Mhm.
you have just one tip for our animal parents out there? You know, our animal companions are so happy right now because we're all home with them all the time, and so what's going to happen when we go back to work or go out for the evening? Because they like it a lot, us being home. So how is it going to be for them, and how do we prepare them?
Well, to our pets, I don't believe they think it's a disaster and a pandemic. I think they think that the world has finally come to its senses, and that all us owners are finally staying at home. Um, and that's going to set a new pattern with our pets. And when our lives do go back to going back to work or whatever, they're not going to be able to understand why that change has happened. And I would
Yeah.
venture to guess that if we don't prepare for that, there's going to be a nation filled with dogs with separation anxiety. Where are you now?
Huh.
So what I recommend everybody to do is at least twice a day. Um, Separate yourself from your pet in another room so that they have their
Hmm.
alone time and recognize that they're still going to be safe, that you're still going to come back and show up, so that it'll help prepare them for the time at which the world goes back to normal.
Wow. Yeah, God, there's so much that you could teach us about living with our furry companions and giving them the best life possible. So,
Mhm.
shall we bring on Karen Ziemba? And would you tell us about the dog that you introduced to her on stage and the one that you introduced to her off stage?
Oh yes. Um, the
Okay, she's on.
in the musical Bullets Over Broadway. Hi, Karen. There you are. I can see you now. And Miss Gertie. Yes, Miss Gertie. I'm sorry. You don't have a microphone, so I can't hear you. Right. There's Miss Gertie. I'm her godfather.
Yeah, we haven't done this before.
Yeah.
Happy Mother's
Now,
Day
what
to
were
your
you
lovely
saying?
wife, Dorothy.
Oh, thank
I
you.
was saying
Thank
Happy
you.
Mother's Day to Dorothy.
Ah, she's here off camera.
Who who
So,
who helped find this little one right here, Gertie.
yeah, that's
Um,
right. That's right.
she
When we,
rescued Gertie, and then I
that's when we started. Yep. When we started
is
Bullets
it
Over
Rich?
Broadway. Uh, what'd you say, Karen?
Oh, nothing. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, Beth, when we started Bullets Over Broadway, um, Karen had been cast in the role, and Susan Stroman, the director, came over to me the first day of rehearsal and said, uh, just to let you know, Karen's dog just passed away a couple of days ago, so she might be a little sad. Um, and when I first met Karen, she was very polite. She was very, kind. And we had a little dog who had been rescued from a hoarding situation, who was very shy and very introverted. Um, and I explained to Karen that she'd be the only one who would be able to pet her and hold her, and build a bond with her. Ultimately, Karen, petted Trixie for a while, and then she went on. And I thought that was kind of odd because, I thought that she was an animal lover. But what ultimately started to happen was every day Karen coming in and working with Trixie started to bond to her because she doesn't love Karen Ziemba. And as a result, I think in the process, Karen healed Trixie's heart, and Trixie helped Karen get back into the saddle, loving dogs again. And after the show was over, she reached out with her husband and said, "Bill, we think we're ready for another dog." And that's when my wife Dorothy had found a dog for them, and that's Gertie there on the piano.
Here she is. Yay!
Yes, she is.
Yes.
Looking good. You're
And
both
she
looking
does,
good.
as you said, Bill, she does like us to be with her every minute, and she does need to be left alone every once in a while to know that, hey, we are going to be coming back. We aren't abandoning her, but she needs some alone time to know that we're not always going to be there. I mean, right now,
Right.
we have no choice. We have to be there all the time, but until we take her out for a walk, which she loves, of course.
Right.
But
Well,
you're absolutely right about
Karen, I
that.
have somebody who wants to say hello to you.
I'm
And
sorry?
here she is. I have someone who wants to say hello to you.
There's Trixie. Hello, Trixie. Oh,
Gertie sees her.
oh, she looks beautiful. She is such a beautiful dog.
Yes.
You're beautiful too. Yes, Gertie, I know. Yes, Trixie is just like an incredible example of the Pomeranian breed. She is a gorgeous, gorgeous dog, and inside and out, she really is lovely and kind. And she just, we took to each other immediately. She was so bright, and she learned her tricks so quickly. And we had a little, we had a little tryout every night before the show, and then we did it again during the show, and we had a really wonderful time. And she did, as
Yeah.
she said, got me into wanting to bond with another new dog, and possibly a dog that especially a dog that I could rescue. And so I'm glad that we went that route with you and Dorothy. And we've been very happy with Gertie. She's also a wonderful, wonderful dog.
Well, I
Aren't you,
can't
kid?
wait for this. I can't wait for this pandemic to get over so that we can get together again and go for a walk along the,
Yeah.
the
Yes.
park. Get our dogs together again.
I know, and for us to be able to come up to the farm and see the dogs. Bill has this
Mhm.
incredible farm, as he said, up in Connecticut, with all these wonderful animals and lots of dogs, and you just can't get enough of
Mhm.
them. They're fantastic. I'd like to share a song with you that was written by Cliff Edwards, and that was in George White's Scandals of 19 something, the movie. And this kind of says it all. Pardon me, but if I may, I should like to speak to you. Maybe you have noticed too, our dogs have learned to care. Winchell mentioned it today. You can see it in their eyes. You can hear it in their sighs. It's quite a love affair. My dog loves your dog, and your dog loves my dog. If our doggies love each other, why can't we? My dog's a he dog, and your dog's a she dog. I wish you loved me the way that he loves she. Dogs, they look sweet every time they meet beneath their favorite tree. My big Airedale wags his little tail to tell your terrier he's crazy to marry her. My dog loves your dog, and your dog loves my dog. If our doggies love each other, why can't we? My dog loves your dog. Your dog loves my dog. If our doggies love each other, we can too. All night he's whining because he's pining to be with her the way I'd like to be with you. I take him out and he runs about to see if she is in sight. By his nose, he knows everywhere she goes. He calls to her, bow wow wow, I love you, and how wow wow. My dog loves your dog, and your dog loves my dog. If our doggies love each other, why can't we? My dog, your dog, If our doggies love each other, why can't we? Oh, look how she pets him. Look how she lets him play around the way I'd like to play with thee. Chows and Pekingese who have pedigrees are crazy over my hound. But your little mutt simply got him nuts, and he'd gladly give her his last piece of liver, 'cause my doggy loves your dog. Your doggy loves my dog. And if our doggies love each other, why can't we? Woof, woof. Woof, woof. She likes it when I sing.
Yay!
Oh, wow, Mom. Thank you, Trixie.
Beautiful, Karen.
How do you feel about sharing the stage with an animal? I don't think you think like WC feels.
No, I don't. But I agree with what Bill Berloni said, which is, get close to the animal on stage and everybody's going to look at you too. So in Bullets Over Broadway, when I was working with Trixie, I got plenty of attention being with that beautiful dog. And she was attached to me, this particular character, Eden Brent. She always carried her little dog around with her. It was like her mascot. And so I got plenty of attention, believe me. It was just fine. And it also was so wonderful to have a furry live thing like that near me who would look up at me with delight and with love. So I was a pig in slop. I loved it.
Well, speaking of animals, you once said something kind of fun, that dance helped you to be a stage animal. What did you mean by that?
Yes, well, learning to dance as a very young girl, what it did, it gave me confidence to enter a stage, to fill a stage, to be confident in front of 1,500 people in live theater, and it just helps you to walk properly, to have comportment, and stand up straight and just say like, hey, here I am. And I think that was just the most incredible thing to have as my background before I got into the live theater. It really did help. And plus, I did a lot of dancing, and I still try to. I don't dance as much as I used to, but I still, from the waist up, I'm pretty good still. The joints start to go a little bit, but dancing, really helps you learn how to fill it up and to send it out there.
Well, I know that there are some actors and singers that won't watch a performance or listen to a song that they want to sing or a role that they want to play because they're afraid of being influenced and being themselves or not being themselves.
Well, especially like when you're stepping into a role in a revival of a musical that's been played by somebody else, like a great, like Angela Lansbury or Patti LuPone, or or
and you've done
Gina
all of
Rivera.
You've done all of that.
Yes, Gwen Verdon, and I say steal from the best or share. Was very influenced by so many wonderful actors, and also by women in film, like Judy Garland and Shirley MacLaine, and some of those greats, Sid Charisse. It's just, you are influenced by them, and you try to share some of the wonderful movements and ideas that they had about their characters, and then you bring yourself into it. So I say, as long as you love what they're doing, why not say, "Ooh, I think I'm gonna share that," or I'm gonna be influenced by that, or I'm inspired by that.
Yeah.
So I say,
I think
watch Kate Hepburn and say, yeah, I want to do that. Betty Davis or anybody.
I think what you had said to me once was that you watch it and you let it funnel through you and it comes you.
Well, that's all you can do. I mean,
Yeah.
it's coming from you. So unless you're actually impersonating somebody, if it's you being inspired by their work and maybe by their take on something, that's something else. That's really what I try to do.
Huh. So. Bill Tatum is your husband, the
Yeah, the other Bill.
the wonderful actor Bill Tatum.
Yes.
You have worked with him too, haven't you?
Yes, we've done a few plays together, and we not often enough. We really enjoy working with each other. We actually get along on stage and enjoy it very much. Yeah, we met doing it. We had met doing a revival of Seesaw by Cy Coleman and Dorothy Fields, and which was originally starring Tommy Tune on Broadway, and we did a revival of it up at the Equity Library Theater back in the early '80s, and we met, and we've been married ever since.
Oh, yeah, one of the Broadway success stories. Nice.
Yeah, keep working at it.
You have played, sung, and danced so many kinds of characters. The good girl, the very bad girl, the funny girl. Where does that all come from?
It's in there. I grew up with 3 brothers, so I could be bad sometimes when I wanted to get my way, and I could be good when I needed something. But I think we're all good, actually. The bad stuff is kind of when you're playing tough characters and stuff that comes from a place where you kind of want to live sometimes, but it's all inside of there because we have all different kinds of feelings and perspectives, and so you just have to let it out.
I guess
and not be afraid.
The older you get, I guess the more you've got to give. Huh?
Yep. The more realized person you are, the more you've lived life, the more there is to draw from.
Huh.
So just keep learning and listening and being in the world.
Well, I've never seen the villain part of you. It's just
you don't live with me.
Yeah. You know the old saying, you can't please them all. Well, it seems like you do. And that is, and everybody loves you, it seems like. And that's so annoying, you know. Or I for to find someone that might have something to say to you. And I might have found somebody that.
Oh my gosh! Hi, Mom! Happy Mother's Day again. Can she hear me?
Thank you. Now?
Go.
Yeah, Karen.
I get.
They hired me to tell a story about you. Are you ready?
How beautiful you are. I have such a beautiful mother.
Thank you. Yes. Well, I'm supposed to be telling a story about you and me because it's Mother's Day. So I'm going to go all the way back to when you were 16 years old. And if you remember, you and I were having a knock 'em down, drag 'em out verbal argument. And you got so upset that you just took off to your bedroom. Well, I pounced up the stairs behind you. And we were standing at your door, really having it out, when you got so angry that you just put your hand up and were going to slam the door in my face. And instead, you punched me in the nose, and I got a black eye. And
Karen.
See, so there's the villain right there.
Okay, I take it back.
And you were placing bets at school that you punched your mother in the eye, and nobody would believe it.
Well, yeah. Well, my mom and she wouldn't let me get away with much. And I was always trying to get, the best of her and get away with stuff. And she would not stand for it. And so we had quite a few fights when I was a teenager. But boy, it really, in the end, it worked out because I realized, as I got older, I said, oh, that's why you told me that. That's why you wanted me to do that. That was great advice. But at the time, we used to have some big arguments, but we also had some wonderful times too, and still do. And
well,
I miss you, Mom. I miss seeing you.
What a treasure
so
to have
great
her.
to see your face on camera.
Well, Karen, should we end by sending love to our mothers, even if they say things like that about us?
Of course.
and paying tribute to our adopted city?
Yes, I wanted to share a song since we're, of course, going through such tough times here, and I know people are like leaving in droves and trying to get out of our town on the weekends, and which I kind of would like to too, but I always find that when I go on vacation or I go away for a while, I miss being here in Manhattan and being in my new hometown so much. There's nothing like it. And I'd like to share a song by my mentors, John Kander and Fred Ebb, in this arrangement by David Loud, in which it seems as if that John and Fred wrote this as almost their prophetic trajectory of their lives, because it's they were these two guys from very different parts of the country, very different backgrounds. John Kander from the Midwest, Kansas City, Missouri. Fred Ebb from our 51st state, also known as the Bronx. But they came together and worked together, and they knew before they did that to be the best they could be, where they had to go to follow their dream. Start spreading the news. I'm leaving today. I want to be a part of it. New York, New York. These vagabond shoes are longing to stray and step around the heart of it. New York, New York. I want to wake up in the city that doesn't sleep, to find I'm king of the hill, top of the heap. My little town blues are melting away. I'll make a brand new start of it in old New York. If I can make it there, I'd make it anywhere. It's up to you, New York, New York. New York, New York. I want to wake up in the city that doesn't sleep, to find I'm king of the hill, head of the list, cream of the crop, and the top of the heap. My little town blues are melting away. I'll make a brand new start of it in old New York. If I can make it there, I'd make it anywhere. Come on, come through, New York, New York. Are you okay, Gertie? Thank you, John and Fred and David, for such a beautiful rendition of that song. And happy Mother's Day to everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Karen, oh, thank you for being with me. Thank you, Bill, wherever you are. I hope everybody's
Bill.
coming back for a bow. There's Bill. Thank you, Bill. Awesome. And who else was out there?
And Trixie, she's
there's
Hi.
Mark.
Hi, Mark.
And Mark, yeah. Yeah. And there's Mama. Yay. And where's Lars? He was pretty indispensable. And
My technical brothers. They're the best.
My tech assistant here, Angus.
Angus, yay,
Come on,
Angus.
oh, there's Matt. There's Matt. There you are. I couldn't have done this without him. And there's Angus. Well, there he is. Thank you. Well, I can't say enough about in-concert productions. I mean, they're just awesome. They were just with me every step of the way. I didn't know what I was doing. That was obvious at the beginning. But they're wonderful. So if I can do it, anybody can say to them, hey, Mark and Matt, let's put on a show.